We have a worldwide panel assembled here today. Exchange programs in the fire service are rare. Could the different perspectives of travelling for an exchange in another country be an avenue for firefighters to obtain some much needed training outside their comfort zone?
Chris, go ahead. I always learn something from you.
Well, thanks, Chief. You know, it's interesting. I actually, as I was listening to all of our conversations here on the roundtable, we're connecting so many different dots here on an international basis through technology, and this really is a testament to what can be achieved in a non-invasive way that has very minimal cost. When we talk about exchanging ideas and programs and benchmarking best practices, insights, and so forth. So, directly to the question, I'll give you some insight. So yes, there needs to be a greater emphasis placed on these types of exchanges, but how we achieve that, I think in today's day and age, very well may be slightly different than what we were expecting to obtain and attain in a different era. First of all, let me just offer some items in terms of an historical perspective. And I actually had the opportunity to sort of live through all of this back in a different era and time. So historically, back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, there was quite a bit of exchange occurring, predominantly through the UK. A number of our colleagues, both Jerry and I, know very well, were coming here to the States and embedding themselves in many of the larger urban type settings, whether it be Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, or FDNY with New York City, Boston, Chicago, and certainly Los Angeles. Many of the larger metropolitan brigades and organizations internationally would come here to the States or then to the North Americas and embed themselves in the urban settings in which, again, a tremendous degree of activity were occurring. So there was quite a bit of that, but again, it started trailing off as we got into the 1980s. There were a number of international missions or exchange programs that were actually sponsored by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Those were occurring back in the mid 80s to the early 1990s. And those exchange missions were predominantly comprised of various fire chiefs from throughout the United States. And they in turn visited numerous countries on a worldwide basis for almost a 12 to 15-year period. They in turn had many other colleagues from these other sister cities or other areas come into the States and also either share or go through a variety of different activities over the course of extended days to observe or participate in various different types of exchanges. The first and foremost, the first formalization of an exchange program occurred in 1995 through the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, in which an instructional exchange program was formalized between UK, Australia, and Germany. And through a competitive process, individuals were selected to become the exchange student or instructor, and they in turn were embedded in those three particular countries and got involved in observations and actually formal instructional delivery to our colleagues in those particular areas. The people-to-people program that was initiated with former President Dwight Eisenhower back in the mid-1950s, 1956, actually saw a number of groups and organizations, predominantly out of the U.S., going internationally through to other organizations. And again, predominantly made out of executive level chief officers. And again, they got involved in these exchange processes. The U.S. and U.K., again, had a very informal program that was actually started by a number of fire chiefs on both sides of the pond who developed an exchange program and a symposium that was held annually from the late 1990s through the early 2000s. And it afforded the groups coming across each part of the oceans to, again, exchange, participate, and get involved in a variety of different capacities. So there were a lot of these occurring in that time frame. But since that time frame, we've seen the diminishing availability of group level activities. But I think what we have seen is individual exchanges, both formal and informal, occurring over the last 20 years. And I certainly have been part of that part and effort. When we talk about going to other countries, I'll just take a step back to say to those that are listening in, sometimes just visiting another city in your particular state or borough or particular area of your country may very well be like going to another country. And again, just based upon the differences in paradigms and customs and activities and rituals and so forth that are occurring in that particular locale, it very well may seem like going to another country. And I'll quickly give a quick side note that Jerry will, and he and I have talked about this. So in the early 1980s, around 1980, 81, I ventured out of my comfort zone to visit another city, and that city was New York City. And again, this was informal, and at that time, many of us were traveling to other areas. And I spent some time in the 35th Battalion in Brooklyn at 108 Truck. And Jerry and I always joke because we very well may have been on the same shift as I was riding with that particular company in that particular era, unbeknownst to him and I both being young guys at the time. But again, I had the opportunity to see how a large metropolitan department was operating firsthand, to identify benchmarking, identify best practices, identify anything that was different than my own organizational structuring, and be able to bring back those particular types of insights. So again, one of the things here that one should look at, although there are merits to go internationally, they are certainly fiscal and budgetary restraints that may not allow the average firefighter or fire officer to participate in those opportunities. We see more occurrences of that happening at the executive level, where there are these types of exchanges that are occurring. But I truly believe that the best opportunity for the future of the fire services globally is to get that firefighter and those company officers, or the emerging or newly minted command officer, to venture out of their comfort zone. And that might occur going to other departments, other cities, other counties, boroughs, other states, and certainly other countries if those opportunities arise. And again, it allows us to do a couple of different things. And I wrote this quick note here. How do I know what I don't know if I don't know it? And that comes about through, again, the exchanges that one has those opportunities to gather and get into. I think that both the financial, the security, and now we're seeing the health restrictions that are impacting us may put a damper on these types of activities. But I think that first and foremost, when we talk about training and educational skill development, the individual opportunity, both formal or informal, is one that has to be identified and pursued on an individual basis. In other words, each and every one of us should seek out these opportunities to go outside our comfort zones, go to other areas to be able to see what's going on, to be able to measure against what we are comfortable with, what we are familiar with, and then identify against best practices, benchmarking those gaps, and then identify both personal and organizational levels of improvement. That truly becomes what we have been talking about here throughout the last 90 minutes: benchmarking, best practices, training, education. One of the challenges that I saw, again, from a personal standpoint of venturing out into other uncharted areas, was just bringing back other ideas at a time in which they were not embraced in our organization, our region, but eventually became institutionalized many, many years later. So one has to move forward with those particular activities. And I would encourage everyone to do that individually, because the chances of doing it organizationally, I think, are becoming far and greater of a gap and are not going to be attainable. But if you can do it on your own dime, I would certainly promote that in terms of those particular applications. So, Chief Tracy, I'll turn it over to you.
Wow. Chris, thank you for going first, because really you've just informed me of many things that I had no idea was going on. And you talk about, up into the 80s and 90s, I was living in a bubble, privileged to work in a 108 truck, to tell you the truth. And we welcomed firefighters from outside the FDNY to ride along and come into fires with us, forcing doors, searching for fire and things like that. And if you really think about the reality of that, what's the liability if this was not, an approved exchange program where the department accepted liability? God forbid you should get hurt. But we had many ride-along firefighters, spend a day, a week with us. And I thought about this question to talk about comfort zone. Human nature is not to venture outside of our comfort zone where we're safe, secure, accustomed to our surroundings and routines. Fear of the unknown for most people is real and it just produces anxiety. Yet, the character traits of firefighters to venture from their comfort zone is somewhat different. We're accustomed to situations that generate anxiety, that raises our adrenaline. We become adrenaline junkies. It's common to respond to events so diverse that they're obliged to enter spaces and circumstances never experienced before, essentially courageously confronting the unknown. So it's not the fear of the unknown, but being comfortable with what they know, how they routinely operated fires and emergencies. They become comfortable having accepted, practiced, and applied their policies, procedures with their understanding of fire dynamics and their applied techniques to emergency operations. Many departments and brigades are living in that bubble that I lived in. What's the incentive to stray outside the bubble? Well, for me, it was curiosity, the thirst for knowledge, and building relationships with like-minded individuals. Stimulating conversations can not only be enlightening, but addictive. There's many talented and brilliant minds in the fire service. Chris, you're just one of them. In the fire service throughout the world. We just have to reach out, strike up a conversation, and learn what they know, how they operate, what stimulates their passion for this profession. I think this is a call that's asking me if I want to extend my car warranty. But it's a case we have to reach out. I want to learn what other firefighters know. And again, what stimulates their passion for the profession. Because we come to realize we're all of the same cloth. We have a lot to learn from each other. I've been privileged to become close, with two individuals that I believe are truly brilliant and have raised my level of awareness and understanding in many aspects of the profession. Peter McBride, and you know him as well, Chris, of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada Fire Service. He's broadened my acumen considerably, and from across the pond, as they say. And I believe you were referring to him when you spoke of firefighters coming from Europe over here to New York, Chicago, and places like that. And that's Dr. Paul Grimwood, a former firefighter with the London Fire Brigade, also a brilliant mind who has made tremendous impact educating the fire service worldwide. They've both been mentors for me over the years, and I thank them for that and their friendship. So we need to reach out, step out of our bubble. Thank you.
I'll just add one quick note here. As we talk about this in the context of training, one cannot become an effective trainer or any other capacity of a trainer without the depth and the degree of perspective on what's occurring well beyond the confines of our perimeter. And whatever that perimeter may be, our department, our jurisdiction, our city, our state, our region, our country, we really need today more than ever to attain this level of global perspective in order to be able to become more literate in how we deliver training and to understand all of the different parameters that come out of best practices, benchmarks, the good and bad of it. I mean, it's also the things that are going wrong. We have to understand why they went wrong, whether they went wrong at Grenfell or in Charleston or any other area in which a significant event has occurred. We also have to understand the paradigm. So that type of exchange, when we talk about perspectives and visiting, sometimes it's just also the virtual exchange of being able to talk to someone somewhere else in the world online, as we're doing now, and be able to garner some insights and information to broaden our perspective. And I think that's all part of it.
I agree. And I'd like to just make a comment to Scott, who was talking earlier on virtual reality, in that they have this program where they're feeling heat. They can operate a hose line, they hold a nozzle, and they can operate it in a straight stream, a fog, or cone pattern. And that when they introduce water, the fire goes out. I'd like to just mention, for most fires, compartment fires, a fire in a flat, and I'm sure that program works very well. You have to be careful in that, my forte is high-rise firefighting. a fire in a large open office area, or let's just say a warehouse arena, a large fire, that program, is it really adapted to a large area fire, tremendous energy being generated? And is that program, the water being introduced from that hose line in that virtual reality program, is it truly programmed for those heat release rates? You know, and I question that when he talked about it. They introduce water, the fire goes out. Yeah, but how about the big fire? That would be a question for me. And that's the international reaching out. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you both.